Hi guys, this is Tech. I welcome you to this video tutorial on creating ASP.NET Core 2.2 application with Angular 7. In this video tutorial, we will be creating and enabling migrations. And to do that, the first thing that we want to do is right click on our project and add a new folder. Call this folder as data. And inside a data folder, we are going to create a class. So let's add a new file. Call this class as ApplicationDbContext. We will use this class to communicate with our database using Entity Framework Core. So let's click New and then let's start coding our class. So the first thing that you want to do is let this class inherit from ApplicationDbContext. Since we want to implement membership into our application, Microsoft's Identity Framework provides us with the required classes, methods, and properties to do that. And it's all available under the Identity Framework. So let's inherit our ApplicationDbContext class from IdentityDbContext class. By doing this, IdentityDbContext class will create for us all the required tables and columns needed for us to manage membership in our application. So let's add the missing reference to Identity Entity Framework Core. So let's do that. And also add the missing reference for our identity user. Next thing is in the constructor of our application DB context class, we need to pass the database context options. These options is basically the options used to connect to our database, like the connection string. So let's go ahead and use our DB context options class and add the missing reference and options will be provided for our application DB context class. And let's call this object as options. And what we are going to do is, since our identity DB context class the constructor requires us to pass these options, so we will pass it to the base constructor. And let's pass these options that we just created. And that's it for the constructor. The next thing that we want to do is we need to create some roles for our users. When we are creating the database tables, we'll make sure we add few roles into our database. You can add more roles if you wish to later as well, but at the time when we create our database, we'll make sure we add some roles in the roles tables. So to create roles, first thing what we want to do is override the OnModelCreating method in our derived context class, which in our case is the application DB context. So the default behavior when it's creating the model, we need to overwrite it, and then we will use our ModelBuilder API to configure the roles related to the model. So OnModelCreating is a very powerful method, and it allows us to configure the models without having to modify our entity classes. So all we can do is use the OnModelCreating method, called the OnModelCreating method, override it, and create an API builder object and use that object to edit our models. So let's do that. So it's a protected override method on model creating, and we want to create an object of our model builder API. Call this builder, and here we need to just call the base dot on model creating method and pass this builder object. Now what we want to do is build this entity. So all the roles related, like the users, like the admin, the customer, the moderator, all the roles are being managed by identity roles in ASP.NET Identity. So therefore we will build our identity roles using this builder object for our identity role class. So the way we do that is, so we'll call our builder object, then the entity for identity role, and then inside the has data method we will pass the required data, and then this data will be added to the identity role table when the models are being created. So we don't have to go and edit the entity directly. With the help of the OnModelCreating method, while the ApplicationDbContext is creating the models, it will add this data into your tables for roles. So it will add 3 roles, one for admin, one for customer, and for moderator. And I've given them 3 IDs, one for admin, 2 for customer, and 3 for moderator. If you want to add more roles, you can add them here at this point, or if you wish to, you can add them later as well, but I'm going to add them here, and I'm just going to use these 3 roles in this application or in this project. So that's it for this application DB context class. One more thing that we need to do is, since we are going to perform CRUD operations on our product table using entity framework, we need to create a database set for our products table. So this database set can be used, this entity can be used to perform our CRUD operations. So we will use the db set class, and then we want to create a database set for our product model. Let's add the missing reference and then give it a name of product. Since we will use plural naming convention here, because the entity framework will go and get all the products and store it inside this entity. So this entity, your products, will contain all your products. So therefore we don't want to call it product, because there will be multiple products inside it. So we use the plural naming convention over here, call it products, and then we just want to set our get and setters, and that's it. Now anytime we want to get any products, or we want to add any products, or we want to edit any products from our database, we can use this entity called products and use link queries on this products dataset. So that's it now for this application DB context. The next thing is we want to add a connection object service in our startup class. Since here we have mentioned that the options will be provided by the constructor for our database context, which database to connect, the connection string, we need to create a connection string service in our startup class. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside your configure services method, using the services object, we will create a service to connect to database. So using dependency injections, whenever we want to connect to our database, we can use this service. So we don't have to create an object of application DB context class every time to connect to a database. We can just use this service, and using this service we can connect to the database. So what we require here is the services object dot add a DB context method, and we're adding a DB context, that's a connection service for our application DB context class. Make sure you add the missing reference using your data, and then all you want to do is inside this you have to now pass some options. What are these options? We'll use some lambda expression here. Options, first option is we are going to specify to use SQL Server. You will find an error that it cannot find SQL Server because you have to add missing reference to Microsoft.Entity Framework core. Now inside this, you have to use your configuration object. Using this configuration object, we will get the connection string from our appsettings.json file. So in our appsettings.json file, we will get the connection string. So everything in this JSON file here is stored as a key and value, key and value. So in a startup class, we need to specify the key which will hold the connection string for us. Default connection. We will call that key as default connection. All you want to do is copy this now. We are done with the startup class. Go to our appsettings.json file, create connection strings key, connection strings, ings, and then here inside this connection string, we have to specify the key which will hold the connection string to connect to our database. Remember, we named this key as default connection, and now we specify the value. Now our database or our server is installed on a Docker container. So at the very beginning of these tutorials, I clearly mentioned in the first video tutorial saying that you have to install the required applications. If you're not familiar with installing Docker, please watch this step-by-step guide. So assuming that you have already installed Docker, and then set Docker, you will have Kitematic. When you click on Kitematic, it will ask you the option to install Kitematic. Go ahead and install it. Once you have installed Kitematic, you will see all the containers that are available in your computer or in your Docker containers. It's basically a GUI application, graphical user interface, which you can use to access all your containers. So there is no need to go into your terminal and access all your containers or start them, stop them. This application can be used to do the same. So now my Kitematic application is up and running. I see all my containers. So I have Oracle container and I have a SQL Server container. So I'm going to go to that SQL Server container and then going to start my container. By doing this, my SQL Server is now up and running. Also, my SQL Server is using the Docker port 1433 and running on localhost 1433. So in case if you anytime need the port number, you can find it here. You can also go to settings and you can find further details like your password, your path, and so on. But for now, I'm just going to go to my home, and I just wanted to show you guys how you can use Kitematic. Now my server is up and running. To make sure it is up and running, as I told you, you need to download Azure Data Studio. Once again, I am assuming you have already watched the first video and downloaded this. So using the password to connect to your server, that is system admin is my username SA, and the password, if you forgot your password, you can go to the settings of your container and you can find it here. Copy this, paste here, connect. Now I'm inside my server, and I can see all the databases. Also, this application is like SSMS, which is SQL Server Management Studio. It's a GUI application which you can use to manage your databases, run queries, and so on. So now here, when we create our new database, we will see it over here. So now I'm going to minimize this, and now I need to create a connection string. So let's go ahead and create a connection string to connect to this SQL Server instance, which is running on Docker container. And for that, we are going to use the port number 1433. So my connection string is server. This is how you'll add a connection string. Server is localhost, and the port number, comma, the port number is 1433, then a semicolon, then the database. Here I will specify the name of the database that I want to when the database is created, what name it should use. This is the name of the database that you're going to connect to. So let me name this database as J, the same as my app. So ng underscore core underscore auth. So, and I'll call it DB, standing for database. Now, the next is the username. My username was SA, which is system admin, and my password was Docker SQL 123. So that's it. We are done with the connection string. If you are using Windows, then you probably have to connect to your server using a different kind of connection string, and please, you can Google it. But if you are on Mac and you have a setup like me where you are running your SQL Server instance on Docker, you can use this connection string. Just make sure you change the password and you also change the name of the database that you want to use. So now save this and can close this. Now the next step is to enable migrations. So let's go ahead and do that. So now go ahead and open the terminal window. And let me just clear this terminal. What you want to do is cd into the project folder. Remember, we created a folder called as ng underscore core, which contains our project ng underscore core underscore auth. So we will drag and drop this ng underscore core underscore auth and cd into it. Cd is basically change directory. So now here we are going to type few commands to enable migrations and to update our database. So let's do that. So first thing you want to type is .NET EF, which stands for Entity Framework, then migrations, and then we are going to add migrations, and we are going to call this migration as initial create. You can name this whatever you like. Since it is our first migration, I'm calling it initial create, and then I am going to hit enter, but I'll just copy the name of this migration I just created, hit enter, and then so the migrations have been created successfully, and you will see inside your project folder you have a new folder called as migrations, and it contains the migration that you just created, which is initial create. You'll see a number before that, which is the timestamp when it was created, and when you open this folder or this class, you will see the required code to create your tables. This is using Entity Framework, and then it will create the required tables and columns that you need in your project. Now, as of now, it has not yet created it. We will not see it if we press refresh. It has not created ng underscore core underscore auth database, the database that we named in our application settings file. So in order to create that database, because it doesn't exist, and create all these tables and columns inside that database, we have to run one more command, which will be .NET. Let me just clear this first. So it will be .NET Entity Framework database, and then the update command, database update, and the name of the migration, which was initial create. Now when I hit enter, it will create the migrations, and you will see a new table called as ng underscore core underscore or db with all the required tables and columns. So let's do that. Hit enter. It will take about few seconds for it to process. So it's completed now, and you see done. And now if I go ahead and open this and refresh my Azure Data Studio, as you see, we have a new database called as ng_core_auth db. We have some tables that is being created by ASP.NET Core Identity. And now, remember, we added some roles. So let's go ahead and open the roles table. And as you see, in the ASP.NET roles table, we have some data. We have created 3 roles: admin, customer, moderator. That was basically created using the OnModelCreating method. So as I told you, it's a very powerful method. You don't have to edit the entity class. Without editing it, we can still add data. So now that's it for this video tutorial. So we have successfully enabled migrations in our project. We have created our database and the required tables. And now the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is start coding our controllers so that we can perform CRUD operations. We can log in, register into our application, send confirmation email. So we'll start working on our controllers from the next video tutorial. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe my channel Tech Howdy.